I was on the verge of death in the hospital, and my wife showed no concern. "I'm not your caretaker. Deal with it yourself," she told me. I simply nodded and remained quiet. As soon as I was released, I gathered my things and walked away. She laughed, thinking she had the upper hand. 2 years later, she was flooding my phone with messages, pleading for another opportunity. Consider adding a resolution or explanation on how this moment specifically affected Jake's immediate actions or decisions. My name is Jake, and I'm 34 years old. Life had always been a series of predictable patterns until that morning when I woke up gasping for air, my lungs refusing to cooperate. The hospital room was cold, sterile, and filled with the incessant beeping of machines. Tubes and wires connected me to life, creating a cocoon of technology around me. I was fighting for each breath, each gasp, a battle against the invisible enemy within. Emily, my wife, sat beside me, but her presence was more like a ghost. Her eyes were fixated on her phone, scrolling through social media or perhaps texting friends. I needed her, not just as a wife, but as my partner in this sudden, terrifying ordeal. One evening, as the room dimmed with the setting sun, I reached out for her hand, seeking comfort. She pulled away, her voice cold as she muttered, "I'm not your caretaker, deal with it yourself." Her words hit like a slap, and I felt my heart sink into despair. I nodded, too weak to argue, too hurt to speak. The day I was discharged, I felt like I had been given a second chance at life. But as I packed my bags, Emily laughed, a sound devoid of warmth, thinking she had won some unspoken battle. I walked out, not looking back, the door closing with a finality that echoed through the empty hallway. Now, 2 years later, the phone rings incessantly. Emily's voice on the other end, pleading, begging for another chance. "Jake, please, I've changed. I realize now what I've lost," she says, her voice thick with tears. It's funny how people only realize what they've lost when it's already gone. I sit in my new apartment, the city lights casting shadows on the walls, and I ponder. What could have driven Emily to such coldness? Was it fear, or was it something deeper? Something I failed to see? And now, with her sudden change of heart, what am I to do? The past 2 years have been about rebuilding. Not just my health, but my life. Her calls stir up old wounds, but they also bring a question I can't ignore. Is forgiveness possible, or has too much time passed for reconciliation? The air in the room feels heavy, laden with the weight of decisions yet to be made. As I listen to her voice, I realize that the journey ahead isn't just about what I want, but about understanding why she became the person she was during my darkest hours, and perhaps, just perhaps, understanding if she could ever be the person I needed her to be. 2 years ago, life was different. Emily and I had been married for 7 years, living in a cozy suburban home with our dog, Max. Our relationship had its ups and downs, but nothing prepared me for the day I collapsed at work, gasping for air. The diagnosis was severe pneumonia, and the doctors were concerned about complications. Emily visited, but her visits were brief, her demeanor detached. She would sit, phone in hand, barely acknowledging my struggle. One night, as I lay there, the reality of our situation hit me. Emily wasn't just emotionally unavailable, she was actively avoiding any responsibility for my care. Her words, "I'm not your caretaker," echoed in my mind. That night, I decided that if I survived this, I would leave. I couldn't stay with someone who couldn't even muster the empathy to support me in my darkest hour. I remember the cold, sterile hospital room, the incessant beeping of machines, and the tubes and wires that connected me to life. Emily sat beside me, but her presence was more like a ghost. Her eyes were fixated on her phone, scrolling through social media, or perhaps texting friends. I needed her, not just as a wife, but as my partner in this sudden, terrifying ordeal. One evening, as the room dimmed with the setting sun, I reached out for her hand, seeking comfort. She pulled away, her voice cold as she muttered, "I'm not your caretaker. Deal with it yourself." Her words hit like a slap, and I felt my heart sink into despair. I nodded, too weak to argue, too hurt to speak. The day I was discharged, I felt like I had been given a second chance at life. But as I packed my bags, Emily laughed, a sound devoid of warmth, thinking she had won some unspoken battle. I walked, out, not looking back, the door closing with a finality that echoed through the empty hallway. Now, 2 years later, the phone rings incessantly. Emily's voice on the other end, pleading, begging for another chance. "Jake, please, I've changed. I realize now what I've lost," she says, her voice thick with tears. It's funny how people only realize what they've lost when it's already gone. I sit in my new apartment, the city lights casting shadows on the walls, and I ponder. What could have driven Emily to such coldness? Was it fear, or was it something deeper, something I failed to see? And now, with her sudden change of heart, what am I to do? The past 2 years have been about rebuilding, not just my health, but my life. Her calls stir up old wounds, but they also bring a question I can't ignore. Is forgiveness possible, or has too much time passed for reconciliation? The air in the room feels heavy, laden with the weight of decisions yet to be made. As I listen to her voice, I realize that the journey ahead isn't just about what I want, but about understanding why she became the person she was during my darkest hours. And perhaps, just perhaps, understanding if she could ever be the person I needed her to be. I didn't confront Emily when I left the hospital. Instead, I quietly packed my essentials while she was out. I left a note, simple and to the point. I need to find myself. Don't follow. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, focusing on recovery and rebuilding my life. Months passed, and I started to heal, not just physically, but emotionally. I found solace in solitude, in the quiet moments of reflection. Then, one day, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Emily, her voice breaking. "Jake, I need to talk to you. Please." The shock was palpable. Emily, who had shown such indifference, was now desperate. Over the next few weeks, her calls became frequent, each one more pleading than the last. She revealed that during my hospital stay, she had been dealing with her own crisis, a secret affair that had ended badly, leaving her emotionally wrecked. She hadn't known how to cope, and in her turmoil, she had pushed me away. Her words were like a puzzle piece falling into place, explaining her detachment, her coldness. But the revelation also stirred a storm of emotions within me: anger, betrayal, and a lingering sense of love that hadn't completely died. "I was lost, Jake," she sobbed over the phone. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I thought I could find something missing in our marriage, but I only found more emptiness. I need you, Jake. I need us to try again." Her voice was raw, filled, with the kind of pain that only comes from deep regret. I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone pressed to my ear, the city lights flickering like distant stars. I wanted to shut her out, to tell her that she had her chance, but her pain was palpable, and it tugged at the remnants of the love we once shared. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision before me. "Emily, I need time," I said, my voice steady but my heart racing. "I need to understand if I can trust you again, if we can rebuild what was broken." There was a pause, a heavy silence filled with the echoes of our past. "I'll wait," she whispered. "I'll wait for as long as it takes." The calls continued, each one a step towards understanding, towards healing. She shared stories of her affair, not to excuse her actions, but to explain the void she felt, the fear of losing me to illness, and how she had sought solace in the wrong places. I listened, not just to her words, but to the tone, the pauses, the sincerity that seemed to seep through the phone. I remembered the good times, the laughter, the love we had before everything fell apart. Could we find that again? Could we rebuild from the ashes of our past? As the weeks turned into months, I found myself at a crossroads. Emily's calls had become a part of my routine, a reminder of what we once had. But the scars of her betrayal, of her indifference during my time of need, were still fresh. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the rain, I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about her. It was about me, too. Could I forgive myself for wanting to give her another chance? Could I forgive the part of me that still loved her despite everything? The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with the potential for both reconciliation and further heartbreak. But as I looked out into the night, I knew that the decision to forgive, to try again, was mine to make. And in that moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. A whisper of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. I agreed to meet Emily at a neutral location, a cafe we used to frequent. The familiar scent of coffee and the soft hum of conversation felt like stepping back in time. Emily was already there, sitting at our old table by the window. She looked different, thinner, her eyes haunted by regret. Her hair, once vibrant, now seemed dull, and her usual spark was replaced by a somber shadow. As I sat down, she took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed a cup of coffee towards me. "I was wrong, Jake. I was so wrong," she began, her voice breaking into a sob. She explained everything, the affair, her guilt, how she had tried to numb her pain by disconnecting from me. Her words flowed like a confession, each one heavy with the weight of her remorse. I listened, my emotions a whirlwind. Part of me wanted to believe her, to forgive and move on, but another part remembered the cold hospital room, her dismissive words echoing in my mind. "I'm not your caretaker. Deal with it yourself." The memory stung, a sharp reminder of her abandonment when I needed her most. As she spoke, I noticed something else was off. Emily's story didn't fully add up. There were pauses, hesitations, moments where she seemed to be choosing her words too carefully. "Why now, Emily?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Why after all this time?" She looked down, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "There's more, Jake, more I haven't told you." Her voice was barely above a whisper, laden with fear and something else I couldn't quite place. She revealed that her affair wasn't just an escape from our crumbling marriage. It was also an attempt to find something she felt was missing, something she thought she could never have with me. But it wasn't just about love or affection. There was a financial aspect, a deal gone wrong that left her in a precarious situation. I got involved with someone who promised me the world, but it was all a lie, she confessed, her eyes meeting mine, filled with tears. He was into some shady business, and when it fell apart, I was left with debts, threats. I was scared, Jake. Scared of what would happen if I didn't comply, scared of losing everything, including you. The revelation hit me like a wave. This wasn't just about her infidelity, it was about survival, about fear, about choices made in desperation. My heart ached for her, but my mind was racing with the implications. "And you thought pushing me away would protect me?" I asked, the pieces of her behavior during my illness starting to fit together in a new, darker puzzle. "Yes," she nodded, wiping her eyes. "I thought if I distanced myself, you'd be safer. But I was wrong, Jake. I should have told you, should have trusted you to help me through it. Instead, I let fear dictate my actions, and I lost you." The cafe. Around us seemed to fade as I processed her words. The betrayal was still there, raw and painful, but now layered with complexity. Could I forgive her for her fear, for her misguided attempts to protect me? Could we rebuild from this knowing the full extent of what she had been through? "I need time, Emily," I said, the words heavy on my tongue. "Time to understand if I can trust you again, if we can rebuild what was broken." She nodded, understanding the gravity of my request. "I'll wait, Jake. I'll wait for as long as it takes." As I left the cafe, the weight of her secrets and my own conflicted feelings bore down on me. The path forward was unclear, filled with shadows of doubt and glimmers of hope. But one thing was certain, the journey ahead would not just be about forgiveness, but about understanding the depths of human frailty and the resilience of love. The truth came out in a rush. Emily had not only had an affair, but had also been embezzling money from her company to fund a lavish lifestyle for her lover. When the affair ended, the financial discrepancies came to light, and she was facing legal consequences. Her desperation to reconnect with me was partly out of fear of facing these issues alone. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. Here, I was, thinking she might genuinely want to reconcile, but instead, she was using me as a safety net. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, the noise echoing her betrayal. "You didn't need me, Emily. You needed a shield." Her eyes filled with tears met mine. "Jake, I was terrified. I thought if I could just get back with you, maybe I could make things right. Maybe you could help me fix this mess." I paced back and forth, my mind racing. "You didn't just betray our marriage, Emily. You betrayed everything we stood for. You stole from your company. You got involved in something illegal. How can I even begin to trust you again?" She reached out, her hand trembling. "I know I've made mistakes, Jake. Huge, unforgivable mistakes. But I'm facing the consequences now. I've been working with the authorities, trying to make amends. I've lost everything, Jake. My job, my dignity, my self-respect. I'm not asking you to take me back as if nothing happened. I'm asking for a chance to show you I can change, that I can be the person you deserve." I stopped pacing, looking at her, really looking at her for the first time in what felt like forever. The vibrant, confident woman I married was gone, replaced by someone who seemed broken. Yet there was a flicker of the old Emily in her eyes. A flicker of hope. "Emily, I don't know if I can just walk away from this," I admitted, my voice softening. "But I also don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. Not without time to process all of this." She nodded, her tears now silent. "I understand, Jake. I've asked for time and I'll give you all the time you need. I'll be here, working on myself, trying to make things right. If you decide you can't forgive me, I'll accept that. But I want you to know, I'm not running from this. I'm facing it head on." The cafe around us seemed to hold its breath as we sat in silence, the weight of our past and the uncertainty of our future hanging between us. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, but also a strange, lingering love. Could we rebuild from this? Could I ever trust her again? "I need to think, Emily," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to figure out what I want, what I can handle. This isn't just about you and me anymore. It's about what kind of life I want to live, what kind of person I want to be." She stood up, her movements slow, deliberate. "I'll wait, Jake. I'll wait for as long as it takes. And if you decide to walk away, I'll respect that. But know that I'm not the same person who left you in that hospital room. I've learned, I've grown, and I'm still growing." As she walked away, I watched her go, the door closing softly behind her. The cafe's noise returned, but I felt isolated in my thoughts, contemplating the revelations in the future. The journey ahead was daunting, filled with the potential for both reconciliation and further heartbreak. But as I sat there, the decision to forgive, to try again, was mine to make. And in that moment, amidst the confusion and pain, I felt a glimmer of hope, a whisper of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. But first, I needed time. Time to heal, to understand, and perhaps to forgive. I left the cafe, the weight of her betrayal heavy on my shoulders. But as I walked, something shifted within me. I wasn't just walking away from Emily. I was walking towards a new chapter of my life. I realized that her actions, as hurtful as they were, had set me free. Free from a relationship that was built on lies and convenience rather than love and support. 2 years later, I've rebuilt my life. I've found a new job, made new friends, and even started dating again. Emily's calls have dwindled, her voice now just a distant echo of a past I've left behind. The lesson was harsh but clear. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters. I've moved into a new apartment, a place that feels like a sanctuary, far from the shadows of our past. The walls are painted in colors that reflect my new outlook on life, bright, hopeful, and full of possibility. I've filled it with plants, books, and art, each piece telling a story of my journey towards healing. My job at a local tech startup has been a breath of fresh air. The environment is vibrant, filled with people who are passionate about innovation and change. Here, I'm not just another employee. I'm part of a team that values my input, my creativity. It's a stark contrast to the corporate drudgery I once knew. And it's given me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Dating has been an adventure. I've met people from all walks of life, each interaction teaching me more about what I truly want in a partner. There's this one woman, Sarah, who's caught my eye. She's got this infectious laugh and a spirit that seems to dance with the world around her. We've been out a few times, and there's a lightness to our conversations, a mutual respect that feels like the foundation of something real. As for Emily, her calls have become less frequent. The last time she reached out, her voice was different, less desperate, more resigned. "Jake, I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, her words carrying a weight of sincerity. "I've been working on myself, trying to understand where I went wrong. I hope you're doing well." I listened, not with the pain of the past, but with a sense of closure. "Thank you, Emily," I replied, my voice steady. "I appreciate your honesty. I'm doing well, and I hope you find your peace." The conversation ended there, and I felt a chapter of my life truly close. Emily's journey was her own now, and mine was unfolding in ways I never imagined. I've learned that forgiveness isn't just about letting go of anger. It's about understanding that people can change, and sometimes that change is necessary for growth. Looking back, I see how Emily's betrayal was a catalyst for my own transformation. It forced me to confront my fears, my dependencies, and ultimately, my desires. I've become more self-reliant, more open to life's possibilities, and more aware of the kind of love I deserve. As I sit here, in my new apartment, with the city skyline stretching out before me, I ponder what the future holds. Will Emily truly learn from her mistakes? That's her path to walk. But for me, the future is bright, filled with potential. I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving, embracing each day with a newfound appreciation for life's fleeting moments. And as for Sarah, well, who knows where that might lead. But for now, I'm enjoying the journey, the laughter, the shared silences, and the promise of something new. Life has taught me that from the ashes of betrayal, love can grow anew, stronger and more resilient than before. And that's the most hopeful lesson of all. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.